This is the Aftermarket Radio Network. Welcome back to Diagnosing the Aftermarket A to Z with Matt Fonslow. And if you're just joining us, you're listening to part 2 of Matt's conversation with John Thornton. If you missed part 1, I highly recommend you go back and catch that. In this episode, we're picking up where we left off, so let's jump back in and continue the conversation.
Do you have a general service tech that you want to grow into your business, but you're lacking the path to get them there? Let NAPA Autotech's apprentice program pave the way. Go to napaautotech.com for more details.
So I know you are a fan of SAE papers, patent papers, white papers, data sheets, as I am.
You turned me on to them along with really Randy Burnclaw. Just you two were really turned me on to that.
Yeah, you really, because those are hidden gems of information. Now, to be quite honest, I may not always understand exactly what the author or authors of those papers are saying, because sometimes it's math. They're showing us some formulas, and I want the big picture, because I'm not going to talk about, analysis at that level in a class, but I would like to understand it myself. So you're going to do your research, and that could be also going to the OB websites and whatever they provide. You can get that information, and then you got to do the research on the cars. So this is where you get known good cars. I'm pretty fortunate. I've worked in Chicago my entire career. I know all sorts of used car lots, plus I live very close to O'Hare. They got a great newer rental vehicle center. So I can get pretty much whatever I want. You get known good cars. And this is something Scott Manna and I did and this is no exaggeration, because you were part of it at one time, for years. We would get together at Scott's shop, and I would tell you, maybe 20, 25 weekends a year, which if you think about that, it's a big chunk of the year. And we would rent a car, or I would get a car from one of my, customer shops, or Scott would have a car from his shop, and we would diagnose and learn at the same time. I remember we did direct injection together. We were doing a class revision, and we started months and months, in advance, probably in the summer before that March. And, we were getting together, and so you have to look at good. You can't just look at good on GM, because then you'll find out, well, that's GM, but that's not quite exactly how Toyota does it. And that's not quite exactly how VW Audi does it. So you have to get a collection of vehicles. So it's not just a vehicle. You got to get a collection of vehicles. And then if you're lucky, and I'm lucky because I'm a mobile tech during the day, then when you're actually diagnosing a vehicle, you're going to have to use the methods, the techniques, the analysis that you believe to be true to make sure it is true. So if I have staying with direct injection for a moment, if I'm diagnosing a vehicle that's got a P0087 or 889 or whatever that code is that relates to rail pressure, what technique am I going to use to find it? And then you have to document. As you're building the class, you ID it, you research it with good paper on the vehicle, and then you have to diagnose broken. Because that really says, what you read is interesting, but that's not really how it works. And there's many examples of that. If once you do, you say, oh, you know what? That's not 100% true.
Yeah, I think there was one we were down there. Between the three of us, we probably spent $1,000 on SAE documents for GDI pressure pumps, trying to figure out what they're doing for pressure control. You were already kind of onto it, but there's nothing flat out saying it, that they're just hammering it back. I think it was finally we hit one that seemed seemingly unrelated, but that was the one that said, in no one's more engineering terms, they're letting it hammer back on the low side. So yeah, that was a good time. I think there was a GM we had in there with like a misfire. If I recall correctly, for cat protection, they were flooding the cat. That was the strategy, was to flood the cat, which I think we're standing there looking at each other like, is it really? I understand the theory of if we have enough fuel in there, it's not going to burn. The temperature will stay low. But it's almost like that's crazy they would do that.
Plus, the other things they have to do to keep the engine running, right? They got to open the throttle blade, they got to retard the ignition timing. That part is pretty amazing. And we can get back to that in just a second. There's got a couple more things here to add. So you ID the topic, you do the research. Hopefully you have broken cars that you can confirm that, okay, this is going to work. If I scope this is a good technique. Then you got to organize it, right? You got to now say, I'm going to present this topic and I'm going to hit so many points. 3 points, 10 points, really doesn't make any difference. but it's got to be organized. And that takes a long time to figure out. I might know it, but how do I present it in such a way that my audience knows it as I want you to know everything I know when you leave. I want you to know what I believe is important and some good methods and some examples to back up, those good methods. And then I'll just say very quickly, then you have the rehearsal, and that which we've already taught. So I did this out of order. So I'm not following my own advice here on this podcast, but so you go through that. So now you have, and I've never actually counted how many hours that have gone into specific classes, but I will say it's a lot. And you do that, and the end result, the benefit, the reward at the end, you present it. And that's how I've always looked at this. You don't need to know what happened prior. All you're going to see is 3 hours. This is what the attendee sees. This is 3 hours. Nobody cares or knows what happens in the background. This is it. But if you've done what in your mind are the right things, you put the work in, you've done the rehearsal, you've done the research, you've organized, it seems to be reasonable. Your reward is you present for 3 hours or 2 or 8 or 16, whatever it is unimportant. But that's the reward. I've always thought when it comes to training, it's like the feel of satisfaction when you diagnose a interesting drivability complaint. Oh my gosh, I'm rolling today. This is great. And that's the same feel, but when you present and deliver a training class, if you believe you've done your best, the best that you can do, I don't care about anybody else. I'm me. I do the best I can do. I'm going to be pretty happy.
I usually have more relief. It's rare for you to present anything once. It's usually a succession of them.
Yeah. So prior to COVID, that was a true statement. I had the great opportunity prior to COVID where I would present a class maybe 12 times in a year. Yeah, once a month might be it. Maybe it was 10 times, but I would present it numerous times. And you can bet that the last version of that class was not the same as the first version of that class. I got better. I had all that time to think about the process, the material, the flow, plus all the cars that I was diagnosing in between that might relate to that topic. I could say, what, this car's got to go. I'm going to bring this car because this is a better example. But now, since COVID, my in-person training, other than big events until this year, dropped considerably. As you know, when I would come up to visit you in Minneapolis or some of the other cities in the Midwest, I no longer do that. I don't do that anymore. And then I just kind of stayed with the big events, maybe, Seattle and of course, Vision and Grand Rapids and, many others. I'm just not mentioning because I don't need to bore your listeners, but I enjoy doing those. But at some point last year, I decided, well, I think that should come to an end. There's a couple commitments that I made in 2024 to some organizations that I'm doing this year. But after this year, I don't really plan on doing any in-person training, except, maybe if a college says, can you donate your time and speak to some instructors? That's a different story. And I'm always willing to do that. But really now the training is the webinars that Tim Hotelling that I do through automotive seminars. So that's really the extent of it. And, that minimizes the time that I have to be away from home. I don't have to drive. I love coming up to Minneapolis. Don't get me wrong. I love coming up there. It was a 6-hour drive. I knew exactly where to get gas. I had it down to a science, but you know what? I prefer not to drive. I prefer not to hop on a plane.
The van used to have the TV with the VHS player in it. And then...
Yes. So I had a TV in the back seat, mind you, because in case I got pulled over, it would be an argument I could never win. But I used to back with VHS. Yeah. So I would buy maybe from, there was a company called Aspire. I bought them from Nissan. I got them from wherever. There was no shortage of VHS tapes. In all seriousness, I wouldn't watch them because I literally it was a very small TV. I ran it off an inverter, and I had it in the back seat, and I could reach, into the back, and I could put the tape in, and I would listen. And so it would help. That was before your podcast became a reality.
You should have had the TV with when we were driving the Vision, so that I would have been occupied instead of.
Oh, that would have prevented all the car issues. You're lucky I didn't roll that vehicle.
Oh man, just whatever you do, Matt, don't mess with the pedal. All right.
Yeah. Well, you should probably tell your listeners that we made a number of road trips to Kansas City Vision. Starting with Chicago. you had a brother that lived in the north side of Chicago for a period of time. I remember picking you up from his house. It was off a major street like Irving or Irving Park or Belmont. But it was north side, somewhere in the north side. Then we would drive it's an 8-hour drive to Kansas City from Chicago, but we always made an hour stop at our favorite lunch place in Iowa that eventually closed and we had to go across the street. But many times Matt was with us, Dan Baumhart, who's currently with ASE, Ken Zanders would join us, Pete Landry, Bob Hype. Yeah, there's always a number of fun individuals with us. And of course, we always had to have a scan tool. So there always had to be at least one or two scan tools. It was a rental vehicle many times, not all the times. And Matt was in the back seat with a scan tool doing some bidirectional. And I typically drove at a brisk pace because I was interested in getting there. Matt would try to mess with me, see what he could turn on and off that would disrupt my focus on the drive. But
or wake Ken up.
Wake Ken up, yeah.
Because Ken just went right to sleep.
I don't know whether it's a good or a bad thing, but for some reason, we weren't talking to Ken while we were driving. He wasn't talking to anybody. So I guess maybe that's good for him, bad for us. But that talks to the importance of attending events, whether it's an 8-hour drive or it's a plane trip. Let's face it. I mean, we have all met many, many friends I call friends today, maybe at Vision or Jim Linder's events. I mean, when Jim started doing this in the latter part of I think it was 99 or 2, I can't remember exactly when Jim started, but when he started doing his Linder event down in Indianapolis, that gave me the opportunity to meet, Randy. And I still talk to Randy Dolman today. Randy's obviously with Pico, and we don't see each other that often, though we have seen each other last year a couple of times. But I still talk to him. So that's a friendship that has, spanned 20 years. I could go on and on. I met a number of gentlemen from Canada at one of the Linder events at the old Holiday Inn, where once you got there, you couldn't leave. There was no place to go, not even a gas station. So we were all in this Holiday Inn in Lebanon. I think it was Lebanon, Indiana. So when the training was over, we would come out and Jim had it set up that there was, like a small banquet room with round tables. I remember one night I was just hanging with these guys from Canada that I had never met before.
John Cochran had to be.
John Cochran, yeah. And then John eventually brought that back up to Toronto, him and his wife, Leah.
Yeah, I think he called it Linder North.
Linder Tech North, yeah. And it's going on today. I think the term, they've changed the title of it a little bit, but the training still exists. So these events have far-reaching effects. Yes, you learn. You go to Vision, you learn. But probably just as important, maybe more important, is who you meet and who you get to know. And especially today with, YouTube and, just how quickly we can interact with people. I was at a training event in Super Saturday and I met Ivan from Pine Hollow. So I follow Ivan. I enjoy his channel and I had a chance to meet him. So that was a big deal to be able to say hello to him. And others, Ivan's just one that I could think of off the top of my head, but plenty of others, so that is really important. And it's easier today, I think, than before. Like when we were starting out in the industry, the extent of my relationships were who would I run into at the local AC Delco training class? That was kind of, there weren't any big events. I can still remember Ken Zanders telling me about Vision. He goes, there's this event that's in Kansas City. And the very first Vision I went to, I forget the location. This was many Visions ago, but she actually had a classroom that was outside under a tent. I forget this is one of the early on. So it might have been maybe 98. Vision just had its 25th anniversary, didn't it? Maybe 99. But whatever it was, I drove down there by myself. I went there by myself. That was career altering. I didn't meet a lot of people at that time, that first one. Because I didn't, I guess, I was just like everybody else. I was kind of quiet. I didn't really know anybody. Ken Zanders, I don't know how he knew about it, but somebody said you should go to this. It seems like a pretty good training event. And it was. And obviously I missed 1 year until this year, but in all those years, I only missed 1 year. My son was playing baseball down in Florida. He had some kind of, forget exactly. We were hoping he was going to be a professional player so I could retire almost immediately. Yeah, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. But those opportunities are very, very important, I think, for our development. And today, I mean, I know I listen to your podcast. I listen to Sean and now Sean and Tommy's podcast. I listen to the Jaded Mechanic podcast. There's a number of them I listen to. And it's great that, to have folks come on and whether it's business management or it's technical or I forget the name of that woman that you have on with personal development, Margaret. Yeah. I mean, I've listened to her speak, 2 or 3 times. Yeah. So we are in a different environment today where, we can gain, information so many ways.
I have the podcast that's kind of like Seinfeld. It's just the podcast about nothing. It's supposed to be automotive, but sometimes I talk about.
I suspect, that your listeners like to hear folks that are a little bit outside of our industry. It's like today, we're not as much as I would enjoy talking about some diag and some cool drivability. That's not really what we're doing. I mean, yeah, we mentioned a couple. I mean, shorted injectors on a little GM is not going to help anybody today, but that'd be something that some folks would be interested in. I know recently you've spent time talking about fuel trim, multimeter usage. And I know you've talked about scopes in the past, scan tools in the past, guys like, Keith and a host of others. So there's always the technical side. That's pretty easy to find.
NAPA Autotech training sessions are being conducted day and night in a town near you. This training caters to every level within your organization, be it a mechanical assistant, a mechanical specialist, a technology specialist, or a driver safety calibration specialist. Imagine a one-stop shop training partner in NAPA Autotech that will lead your team to a path to greatness. Autotech's entry-level Build-A-Tech classes convert the untapped potential of your new hires into money-making mechanical specialists. Autotech's higher-level tech update classes introduce specialists to the world of ever-changing technologies, which prevents your shop from getting technologically stagnant. Remember, if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. And, turning to the front of the store, the Autotech Service Advisor class is an awesome way to hone your client advocate skill set, ultimately benefiting the customer through an improved vehicle repair experience. But it doesn't stop there. Imagine an electric vehicle class that takes your specialist well past the mundane, yet necessary safety topics. Well, it's here. Autotech's EV Ready training is a week-long curriculum that takes participants through a hands-on experience involving hybrids and electric vehicles. The session kicks off with the use of PPE and proper tooling while touching on required OSHA regulations. Then, the students dive into the lab vehicles to gain knowledge of the common high-voltage components on EV and hybrid vehicles and their function. Attendees will be taken on a path exposing them to different electric vehicle manufacturers to compare component form and location. Additionally, information about Level 1 and Level 2 charging systems will be included, along with a quick look at DC to DC charging. The operation and maintenance of subsystems are explored, including the different modes of Tesla operations, and so much more. So what are you waiting for? Commit to taking your business to the next level with NAPA Autotech training. Yeah, I was going to say the first, big event I went to was Linder, Guru 1. You went to bat for me. You tried to talk Jim into letting me go to Guru 2. Just skip 1. And he's like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose. So that was the first thing I went to. I had the benefit of, not that you were on IETN, but you stuck mostly to the forums, where I got into the chat room, and that's where I ran into like Harvey and Paul Danner. I mean, so many others. Tim Izzy just goes on and on. We could name drop for a long time. Riggle, Ragsdale, Burnclaw, Kemper. And that was a really good group to get tied up with and listen to and read and interact with. You're kind of like, you got to go to one of these events. And I think, Linder's, this event's coming up. You should really go. And that just opened up doors, and it set you up for, I think, Guru 2 is where you'd already talked to me a little bit about Baumhart, that he had gone to Alexandria Tech, and you knew that we had gone to that same program. And Guru 2 is where you finally got to introduce us. And then, of course, we really hit it off. And yeah, Cohenham is still one of my best friends. Yeah. And that was just the beginning. And then Baumhart's like, you want to go to Vision? I'll get you there.
Yeah, that would be Dan. But again, it's the importance of, you never know how you're going to meet someone. Like, I helped you interact with Dan. So I was the middleman, so to speak. But then you've become the middleman for someone else to meet someone else. So you've got folks that that you've introduced, maybe to other folks that they didn't know. And now they have a relationship. They're friends. They can call each other for assistance, so it doesn't take much to get that started. Like here in Chicago, I have so lucky to have so many friends. I have my friends, guys that I grew up with, that I've known for, I don't want to say how long, but a long time, a really long time. And they're non-automotive guys. These are, friends, family. We do kid stuff together, or when my kids were kids, but we've stayed together as a group. But yet now I have another group of automotive guys, and primarily guys, a couple women, but mostly men that, I got to know from either working on cars, doing training classes, training events. And, if somebody picks up the phone, and again, I never answer my phone when I'm in the shop, but if somebody calls me and I'm driving, yeah, I'm going to answer the phone. So, there's value in that, not just maybe I can help you with a car, or maybe you can help me with a car, but just the friendship value part. Like, I may not see you like I used to, right? But I can still, if I want to, I know I'll pick up the phone, and unlike other folks, you'll answer.
He's talking about you, Pedro.
No, Pedro, he answers my calls. I probably shouldn't have said that. Now he'll take some heat from you, but, yeah, Pedro. Oh yeah, we talked during the week, actually, this past week, but yeah. But so, in Chicago, there's a lot of guys like Pedro, Tim Jones, these Tommy. There's a lot of, younger guys that are moving vertically, through the industry, moving, very smart guys. And of course, when you're smart in your 30s and 40s, and if you want to be, you're going to be even smarter as time goes on. You're going to, it's all that experience, all that wisdom.
Yeah, I somehow screwed that up, but
I hope you're not going south instead of north, but
there's not too much further north to go in Minnesota.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
I'll end up next door to Jeff.
Oh, from Jaded Mechanic?
Then it'll be the Jaded Mechanics podcast, plural.
I've never met him. I don't know him. I know what he looks like from his podcast picture, but I really kind of enjoy listening to him. I think he's got an attitude that many in the industry either have or have had. And then maybe something changed and things got better or different. But a lot of things that he talks about resonate because, I have not worked in a shop 26 years. So, being mobile, I've been in shops, and you can tell as soon as you put your foot in a shop what kind of shop it is. You can tell pretty quickly, is this a group of folks that work well together, they gel, everybody knows what they're supposed to do, and it's a machine. It's kind of almost like a work of art, what's happening in the shop. And then there's shops, I'll just say, are the opposite of that. So I kind of get where he's coming from. I definitely still see some of the things that he is concerned with that still exists. Big numbers too, unfortunately. Big numbers.
For a lot of years we had talked about a lot of really, really quality techs out there that probably were not getting compensated well for that skill set. I'm sure it's not changed across the board, but it seems like it's changed quite drastically for a great many.
I just look at the shops that I go to that in my world, it's a small population of a few hundred shops. And certainly there are more today that are professionally run. Now, these are businesses. The shop owner is not carrying a wad of cash in their front pocket, and that's the cash register. There are those shops. Those shops still exist, but more shops, that they have professional shop management systems. They have an advisor, service advisor, service writer, whatever the title of the person kind of running the shop. Maybe not the owner, but the person running the shop. So they know how to distribute work, make sure that the tech gets the right job that matches their abilities, their tooling, etc. And there's mentoring going on. You can see people helping each other. That's really nice. Good lighting, hot water. There's simple things, but Chicago's a pretty big market, pretty diverse, and there are places that do not have good lighting. They have poor lighting, and they have dirty floors, and they don't have hot water heaters.
Some of them don't have internet.
There's service information limitations. Yeah, you see a little bit of everything, and I think this is true of any market, anywhere in the country, maybe North America, but I believe that there's more of the better shops. Now, I think they're the majority now. They're the majority. So it's still, we got to get a lot more to that side, better run. Because if you're in a shop that's well run, well organized, your compensation your value to the shop is much different. A shop is going to fight to keep you. If you decide to leave Riverside, I know Dave's going to say, wait a second, we're going to have a conversation. I don't want you to do this. What can I do to make you stay? That's the kind of, that's how we want to be felt, as a tech. I mean, when you work for yourself, I'm my own worst boss, but I don't have that particular issue. What's funny, before you answer. So, this is the first podcast I've ever done. Never been on a podcast. Listened to hundreds and hundreds of them. Not just, but, okay, good. And, I listen to all sorts besides automotive. And there's all these other podcasts that I listen to. I told you last year, almost a year ago, that I would do one. And then for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And, now I'm doing one. So in the meantime, I get a call from Tommy, because now Tommy and Sean are together, and Tommy wants me to do a podcast. So next week, I'm doing a podcast with them. So haven't done one in all these years. Now I'm doing 2 in a row. This today, of course, Sunday, and then next Sunday with them. And that'll probably be it. That'll be the first and the last. And not because, I have anything against them. It's just that, enough's enough. 2 of them is probably plenty good. So, we talked a little bit about, from a repair viewpoint, about documentation. I'll just share the method that I like to use. And now it helps me with training. But even one day in the future, when I stop training, assuming I'm still diagnosing vehicles, I will still follow the same routine. And that is, on most vehicles that I do, I run a PowerPoint. I have tried to avoid paper. I don't like scribbling on pieces of paper anymore, because just about everything we do is on a computer anyway. Many of my scan tools, not all, but many of my scan tools are PC based, GDS2, IDS, YTech, just as examples. So it's very easy to save screens, alt print screen, whatever the button is on your computer. It's pretty easy to save the data, and it forces me to pay attention to what I'm doing. Tomorrow is Monday. I've got 3 cars I'm looking at tomorrow. And so I know what those cars are, and I know a little bit about the cars. So I know what the codes are. I know what the complaint is. So I've done homework. I got to do a little bit more today on one of the cars, but the other 2 cars I've prepped on. So when I get to the shops, the cars will be ready. I will call to make sure. And then I will open up my PowerPoint, and I will open up my computer, whether my computer has a scan tool on it, or maybe I'm using an Autotech, a handheld device of some sort. And then I will start the process. I will analyze, I'll look for codes, try to reproduce the result if I can, who knows. But while I'm doing that, instead of trying to memorize what I'm looking at, I'm taking notes. The trims look really good. The front air fuel agrees with the rear O2. I can trust the trims. I feel the miss at idle only. I elevate to 1200 RPM, miss kind of goes away. I throw it into gear, RPM maybe drops 100, miss is worse. I do a brake torque in gear, miss goes away. So that stuff, I'm typing it. It's not pretty, and I might misspell a word, but nonetheless, I'm getting it in my PowerPoint notes. And then if I see something interesting, I save the screen and it goes into the PowerPoint. And if I decide to break out the scope, of course, it's Pico for me. That's my preference. But regardless of what the tool is, if I decide to break out the scope, every Pico screen, for example, I save, because it's so easy to save. So I save them. You have, at the beginning, to run a PowerPoint in parallel with your scan tool or your scope is awkward. It takes time. And at the beginning of just about anything, our progress is slow. Everything is grinding to a halt. You start saying to yourself, is this even worth doing it? But eventually, with time, it's second nature. I don't even think about it anymore. It just is how it goes. And the upside is, when I'm done, and hopefully the diag is correct, you can go home if you're so inclined. You can go home, you can clean it up, you can work through it. You can say to yourself, I did this car. It took me 45 minutes. And I'm not good or bad. It could have been 2 hours and 45 minutes. So it took me 45 minutes, got the car done. This is what I did. If I were to do this car again, knowing what I know now, what would have been a better test? Or what test? Maybe there's a test I didn't do that I should have done that would have been better, and it would have knocked off time. And you've seen me work. I don't care about time. I'm self-employed. If it takes me X amount of hours because I want to do a few other things to broaden my knowledge base or to truly understand what's going on with this engine management system, I'll do that. I'll do that at a heartbeat. I'll add an hour. Now I realize most techs can't do that, so I understand that. But you can document, and you need a way besides paper, right? I mean, your manila folder days are long gone, I'm sure, right? So I think if a tech is not doing this and they start doing this, they will quickly find that their skills and knowledge will increase. And you don't have to do every car. Again, I'm a mobile tech, so the majority of what I do, there's a somewhat challenging. Not all of it, but a lot of it is interesting. It requires, a process. You got to think your way through it a little bit. It's kind of challenging. But if you document that, you've learned. And now you know, and think about your database. So if you're doing, let's say let's just be conservative. You do 10 interesting cars a week that you've documented. And let's just say it's 50 weeks a year of work. So that's 500 documented vehicles. 10 years, it's 5,000. 20 years, it's 10,000. Now, a lot of that eventually it's older. It goes away. You never see it again. But think about what you've developed, not just so much for the car, but the process, the technique, the routines that you've developed. When you sit in that car, you don't need a script to say, I am going to do this first. I know what I should do if it's a misfire. I know what I should do if it's a rough idle without a misfire. Things like that. I'll give you a quick example. This happened during the week. It's a 2018 Audi Q3 2-liter CCTA, older technology, VW Audi engine, cam phasing on the intake only, direct injected turbo, etc. The shop has been working with the vehicle for a while, and the problem is it's got a really rough idle. It runs horribly. If it had an EGR valve, it'd be like an EGR valve stuck open, which is a really good clue, by the way. So, and the shop tells me that we are chasing a misfire on cylinders 1 and 4. And they've done injectors, ignition, carbon clean, pull the intake off, all that. And when I go there and I hook up the Rostec VCDS, and yes, cylinders 1 and 4 are misfiring like crazy. The counters are just counting up like 400, then resetting. And 2 and 3 got ghost counts. A hit here, a couple of hits here. But it's not like it's misfiring on one, the whole engine just runs really bad. It just runs really rough. I did put a pressure transducer in it. So the idle vacuum was 7-8 inches of mercury. In Chicago, I'd expect this engine to be 17 or 18. So it's got really, really low vacuum. But if you elevate the RPM, it's better. I've paid my dues with VW Audi. I've paid my dues with measuring blocks. But so finally, all these years later, I understand measuring blocks. And I know how to navigate. And Rostec makes a lot, the VCDS tool makes that reasonably easy to do. And I go into block number 3, which shows the intake cam phase angle, which is kind of a way of saying, how far is the intake cam out from where it's supposed to be? So usually it's a negative number, like maybe a negative 8, 10 degrees, which might set a code, maybe not. This is a positive 59 degrees. That's what the number is, a positive 59. And that's important for 2 reasons. Positive means the cam's advanced, and 60 is the total phase angle. It can't go more than 60. That's max. And I don't believe in coincidence. So that tells me that either the actuator, N205, the plastic pancake actuator, the pin is somehow magically stuck out, or more likely, there's something wrong with the bolt, which is the control valve, the spring-loaded control valve. And it turned out it was the bolt. I took a Phillips with the engine not running, for those of you listening, with the engine not running, and I took a Phillips, and it's spring-loaded out, and it was flush. Sometimes they stick out, but it was flush. But I tried to push it in, and there was something binding. And I work it, and finally, now it's free to move. Well, the car's fixed. Now, it's not a proper repair, but my long-winded point is, the answer to what was wrong with that vehicle was in scan data all along. And the shop had focus, and there's nothing wrong with this, cylinders 1 and 4. So you would think if cylinders 1 and 4 are misfiring, it's not going to be something common. It's going to be something specific to 1 and 4. And that's kind of what they had focused on. And I did find that out, because the majority of the time that it was running bad, 1 and 4 were misfiring, 2 and 3 weren't. Now on a cold start, all 4 were misfiring. But as it warmed up, it was strictly 1 and 4. So, scan data was a little bit misleading there. But again, knowing about like Group 93 as an example, paying your dues, going to a training class, watching a YouTube video or something, that would have said, hey, almost 60 degrees, phase angle 60 degrees. And you know what? Let's take a look at this first. So I documented. That's a case study. I have a case study there of that vehicle. And will I ever use it in class? Maybe not. Probably not. It'll be reinforced. So next time somebody calls me and says, hey, John, I got a 2-liter CCTA engine that's running poorly. I have a fairly monstrous VW Audi file folder with all sorts of things I've learned about these cars. That'll be top of mind. I'll remember, I got to pay attention to 93. I got to pay attention to the GDI blocks, or 32 and 3 for trim, or 99 for loop status. I'm not just winging the numbers. This just happened a few days ago, so it's top of mind. But that's the stuff that preps you.
Yeah, and some of that stuff too, it's the assumption, which, we were talking about scan data is so much better than it's ever been, so much more of it, and it's so much faster, but it's still limited by what they have available to use to determine misfire. And then the algorithm itself, if it's crank angle acceleration and it's running that badly, it's kind of back to the garbage in, garbage out. If that crankshaft is just doing weird stuff because of how poorly it's running, the misfire data is probably not going to reflect it perfectly. It can't.
Every tech has run into a vehicle that, for whatever reason, that the misfire counters are not entirely accurate. Now, maybe one of the cylinders is accurate. Maybe number 1 is missing, but maybe number 1, 3, 4, 2, number 3 is not, but it shows it. Or sometimes they get mixed up. Somebody swaps a Ford PCM on a misfiring vehicle, and the PCM that gets installed is from a different vehicle. And now what the misfire shows up wrong. I'll throw one more out and then we can wrap it up if you like. I did a CAN bus class with Tim, Automotive Seminars. We did a Zoom a couple weeks ago. And I have a case study within that class on a Dodge Durango that has a CAN bus issue. And on those vehicles, they have a TIPM, the totally integrated power module. So the TIPM is a gateway for the CAN bus. And when you look at a wiring diagram, the CAN bus, of course, the TIPM is on the CAN bus because it's the gateway. But the high-speed CAN bus goes through the TIPM. So I'm going to, obviously we don't have a wiring diagram to look at. We know there's a lot of connectors on a TIPM. The vehicle that I had 7 connectors. So connector number 1, it's black. It's got 50 cavities. Half the CAN bus, approximately, is coming out of that connector. And then connector number 7, which is also black and has 50 cavities, the other half of the CAN bus is going there. So if you have my vehicle was broke full time. It was not an intermittent issue. It was broke right now. So if I want to apply a divide and conquer strategy to figure out where on the CAN bus the problem is, the TIPM is a great place to go. And the shop had already put a TIPM in. But I can go to the TIPM, I can disconnect C1 and C7, and now I can use my ohm meter if I want. And it was the appropriate tool for the job.
Perish the thought.
Oh, yes. But as you know, it can do the job. But I can isolate. But my point is that when you think about the last time you looked at one of those, Chrysler, Dodge TIPMs, and you're looking at a wiring diagram and it says C3, or it says C4, or C1. And then you go to the TIPM, and the first thing you have to do is figure out, okay, which one is C1? Which one is C4? Now, they're color-coded, generally, right? But they're color-coded. So in the class, I wanted to make the point, the same point I'm going to make right now, that after having that conversation with myself, which one is the right TIPM connector, why don't I just take a picture of one, figure it out today, what color the connector usually is, what position C1 is in, what position C, and put that in a PowerPoint. And then over time, I can get a better picture. I can have better notes. That's one of the things I talked about in the class. I showed them, I call them cheat sheets. I don't look up TIPMs anymore. I don't go into All Data or Chrysler and say, how long is it going to take me to figure out where C7 is on a TIPM? I open up my TIPM cheat sheet and I have a picture of what it looks like upside down and sideways. And I know exactly what connector goes where and what color it is. That's time saving. That's part of documentation. So you do that one time, that goes into today, your computer, whether it be PowerPoint or Word, and I know there's a host of software similar to PowerPoint. And why reinvent the wheel? Why spend 5 minutes or sometimes more trying to figure out where a connector is or how this thing is organized if you do it once? If you document one time, all you do from this point on is you improve upon your documentation. The wheels, you've already created the wheel. Just we make it smoother and faster, more round, I guess.
Yeah, this will probably sound like I'm putting myself over. seriously don't mean it that way, but it resonates a lot with journaling. Like I did a podcast episode, I think with Carm, pitching this idea of journaling, especially for young techs. Like you're just getting started, almost like a diary. Go to Google Docs or something and just kind of put down what's going on for your day. What went right? What went wrong? What could you have done better? And then go back after a while and reread them and go like, I got to do that. I forgot. I need to avoid that. And it doesn't matter what role you're doing. Well, that's essentially what we're doing here with PowerPoint and case studying our vehicles, whether it's all of them or the quote unquote interesting ones or whatever, is taking those documents, documenting what we're doing, maybe even what we're thinking, just so we remember even for later if we're going to analyze it at home. It just resonates. That's what's going on. And that's how you keep progressing further and further and further. And, maybe you're looking over what you dumped into your PowerPoint at home just quick. I'm not saying you're spending hours just poring over every slide, but you got 5-6 slides that you quick dumped in and a couple thoughts you typed up in the notes. And then you're like, you know what? When I get to work tomorrow, I got to go look at this. I have to grab my scope, my scanner, my whatever tool or a flashlight and go look at this because, that's what this is screaming. And then it's like you said, you keep revising that and going like, what could I have done better? Oh, flashlight. When would I have got this flashlight out? Oh, well, I didn't have to do this step or this step. I did it this time because I didn't know better, but now it makes sense that I could made this leap over to here, and this is why. And there's not enough of that.
Yeah, and it helps answer some important questions that a less experienced tech may have during a diagnosis. And that is, where do I start? How do I start? The guy 2 bays away from me, it's natural to him. He grabs that scanner tool, he sits in the car. I have no idea what he's doing, but he's doing something. As soon as he gets out of the car, he's taking something out, he's doing something. That's hard to learn. I think it's a little bit hard to teach too, because there's just a variety of issues to be dealt with. But an individual has to create a routine, a process that helps guide them through the process, whether it be instructing or diagging, makes no difference. You have to have some kind of routine. And at the beginning, it's not good. It's going to get better. You're going to get faster. You're going to get sharper. You'll be more direct in your approach. And I always try to think about that in class. And that's why I really like case studies, because a case study, while it may not be the only way to diagnose a vehicle, it's a way. And if somebody has not done this before, and they said, what that guy did kind of makes sense. That's something I could see myself doing. Great. That's a home run.
And then like making friends, building up these relationships and sending these PowerPoints. I remember a time where I think I had a Chevy 5.3 liter misfire one bank, and I had gone a few steps past what I needed to. I sent you and Scott and Aaron Keppen and Baumhart this PowerPoint. A couple of you guys mentioned, email me back like, hey, the answer is actually in your second slide. If you go look at your scan data, you could have known what was wrong. And didn't give it to me. Like you didn't say like, hey, this is what's going on. I had to go back and look at it. And then it's kind of like, oh, if I'd have looked at the rear O2 sensor. Oh, Matt, the front O2 is lying.
But you learn that, right? You can go to a junior college like I did, get a 2-year degree, and I'm barely effective. I'm barely able to do anything from a diagnostic viewpoint. For me, I was fortunate I went to work for 2 brothers in a shop. They were nice to me. They didn't expect much from me, so, I could, and back then, of course, breaker points still kind of ruled, as did carburetors. So, it wasn't like it is today, It takes time. And your example is really good. Yeah, you did more, but you learned to do more. Maybe you didn't get it initially, but you got it. Plus, whatever those extra tests were, now you're developing your skill on how to do those other tests. I mean, if you think about a technician today, all the stuff we have to know, the tests that we have to be able to run, whether it's mechanical or it's ignition or it's fuel, and whether it's pressure or injection or wiring, or all the things we have to know, you don't get that overnight. And you don't get it unless you work hard on it on a regular basis. You got to force yourself up. The relationships, the training, the quality YouTube channels that are out there. That all helps. It helps. I've always had a belief that I played sports when I was younger, and I've always believed that if you want to be better at your sport, whatever your sport is, you don't play with guys, girls your age. You play with the big kids, because the big kids are going to push you around and they're better than you. They jump better. They shoot better. Talking basketball, for example. If you're going to stay on the court with them, you're going to be forced to develop. If you're the big dog on the court, you're not going to get much better. But if you're the little dog with the guys that know how to play, yeah, you're going to get better. So we need to hang around to find ourselves in situations where we're with people that are they're good at what they do and they're super passionate about what they do. That I'm a drivability tech, or I'm a transmission tech, or I'm an electrical whip, whatever they are. Get to know those folks and see how they do what they do and why they do what they do. And maybe emulate to a degree, right? That's part of it.
That's what I've tried to do. Failed epically, but I've tried.
So I went to a junior college in Chicago, Triton College. I think you probably have heard of it. Very good school. Went there for 2 years, and I had an instructor who passed, but his name was Ray Oviak, and he taught engine rebuilding and steering suspension. And I took both of those top classes with him. But a turning point for me, I'm 19 years old at this point. But a turning point for me is, when he taught engine rebuilding, before we got into, I couldn't wait to pull pistons and, I had never done that before. I was waiting to do that. But before we could touch an engine, we had to prove what was wrong with the engine. So the first part of the class was on how to diagnose. Now, this is going back a lot of years, but it was using the compression gauge, using the cylinder leakage tester, using the vacuum gauge, using the big box engine analyzer to look at secondary, how to do a manual power balance with a test light. Even though I had a tune-up class, I didn't learn any of that stuff. But that he was the true initial catalyst that said, you know what, you really need to learn how to test before you do the work. And little did I know all those years ago that was really, really groundbreaking for me. And then after Triton, I went to work in a shop, these two brothers that kindly took me in and guided me. And then I decided, like a half a year later, I needed to know more. I just didn't know enough. And I ended up going to Bradley University. It's a 4-year university in Peoria, Illinois. It's about 3 hours from my home in Chicago. And I went there because they had an automotive engineering program. And because of Triton, I only had to take 2 years of classes. So it wasn't too bad. They had a number of part-time instructors that worked at Caterpillar. Because at the time, Peoria was headquarters for Caterpillar. They were men, but these gentlemen, they typically taught at night. So I didn't really know any of this. So one of the classes I wanted to take, I had to take, wasn't being offered during the day, was being offered at night. I wasn't really a fan of doing this. I wanted to do other things at night, but you got to do what you got to do. So I took this class. This gentleman, and I forget what the classic was, maybe like mechanical dynamics type of class. But what he taught was how to think, how to confront the problem, how to define the problem, and then how to create a solution to the problem. It was a process for him. And he was definitely an engineer. There was no and, or, ifs, or buts. This is how you do it. You do this first, you do this second, you do this third, and you work your way through the problem. And again, I thought to myself, I never heard anybody talk like this before. I never heard anybody say, this is how you diagnose a problem. And he didn't care what the problem was. He didn't care if it was an electrical issue, mechanical issue. And to this day, a lot of what I've done, like when I talk about, development of class, I do it exactly the way that this guy talked about it. Now, clearly it's changed. That, I don't do it, word for word. The whole concept of define it, create the plan, execute. That's diagnostics 101. That's, if you were to sum up what as a tech we need to do to diagnose or to create a training program, define it, create it, and execute it. And that's really all the diags that I do and all the systems that I work on. Fundamentally, you could break it down into those simple steps. And the same with training. I approach training the same way I approach diagnosing. A little different skill sets, but some overlap, but it's the same kind of thing. So Matt, I didn't get through all my papers, but that's, I think, probably a good place to leave you. And I'm going to make your editors work pretty hard.
Yeah. I mean, you've wrapped this up a couple of times with perfect rant.
A little bit of a rant. Yeah, a little bit of a rant. Maybe I will do this again. Who knows?
You should. I want to see what else is on that sheet of paper.
Well, I got to save a little bit for Sean and Tommy. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no end.
I think they might have a different direction, knowing Tommy.
Where do you go to eat?
I mean that in a good way, of course. But
oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I really appreciate you having me.
I really appreciate you coming on and taking time out of your Sunday to do it. Yeah, I mean, thank you for everything.
Absolutely welcome. I'm not sure if I'm going to listen to this podcast or not. I think you went back to what comedians and maybe actors. I don't know if they watch their own stuff or not, but maybe I will. Maybe I'll listen to a few minutes.
See if Matt snuck in anything that you didn't catch. You need to have a talk to me about later on. And
I'll talk to you later on, but it'll be about something else, I'm sure. All right, man. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, sir. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you to our sponsor, NAPA Autotech Training. And thank you to the Aftermarket Radio Network. And yeah, until next time, take care.
You've been listening to Matt Fonslow, diagnosing the aftermarket A to Z on the Aftermarket Radio Network. Follow Matt on your favorite listening app. He's very interested in what you have to say. Let him know what you'd like him to cover and come on the show. Matt is all for advancing the aftermarket. Find Matt Fonslow on social media and connect or on aftermarketradionetwork.com.